Hey y'all, it's Katie. Welcome back to From My Vanity and welcome to a new view. I was filming down here and kind of struck me that, yeah, I was using the window, but the lighting isn't very good downstairs, even though it's on the same wall that I usually film with upstairs. We have a pretty big tree in our front yard and that shades the front of the house a lot for the downstairs. So when I've been filming, I just feel like my quality's been really crappy because I'm having to adjust so much and I look very washed out and just grainy in my videos, at least the previous videos I filmed. So we are trying a new setup. I'm still in the same room, but I'm just turned a little bit. I'm pretty sure the sound quality is still gonna be crappy, but at least hopefully the lighting is a little bit better. I don't know, we're giving it a try. Definitely let me know what you think down below. I'd love to hear your feedback and I feel very season appropriate, even though these decorations are up all year round, because I'm someone who I love decorating my house in the fall season because all the fall decor is out and I love it. It's beautiful. And then it stays up all year because I love oranges and browns in my house. So that is what I decorate with. But anyway, yeah, all that to say, we're in a new view. Let me know what you think about this view and the lighting, and I apologize for the sound quality. Let's talk about some palettes that I think, and this is just my opinion, but I believe that the brands, when they were formulating and creating these palettes, focused a little more or a little too heavily on how they look when you swatch them with your finger on your arm, as opposed to how they apply on the eyes. I can't even remember how I came up with this concept, but yeah, I just feel like there are some brands, I mean not even brands, some products that brands put out that I think they focus a little too heavily on how they look when they're swatched and not so much on how easily they are applied to the eyes. Because I feel like, especially in this day and age, I feel like Instagram and arm swatches are a huge thing, and when a brand is going to release a new palette, they release their arm swatches, they are huge and people get so excited depending on how they look swatched. That's just the way it is these days. Yes, some people are like, well, you know, it doesn't matter how it's swatched, how will it apply on the eyes. But for the most part, in general, I feel like people get really hyped when they see really nice swatches. And there have been some palettes, at least, and I'm just going to be talking about palettes from my experience that I've actually used and that I actually had that experience of like, oh my goodness, this swatch is so nice. But then using on the eyes, it's like a whole different ball game. So I was able to find 5 palettes in my collection that I was like, yeah, those palettes I was super excited for when I just like finger swatched them before I actually put them on my eyes. And then trying to put them on my eyes, you know, it goes both ways. Either they're like too pigmented and hard to use, or they're like not pigmented enough and hard to use. So yeah, that is what we're gonna be talking today. I don't really know if this is gonna be a very informative video. I just hope this will be a little bit entertaining, a little bit of like a PSA, just kind of announcement to share, because I feel like these products, they should have focused more on how they apply to the eyes. And another reason I was wanting to make this video is because I feel like even like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years ago, swatching wasn't as important. Like brands that came out with palettes, yes, they would swatch them, but I feel like it wasn't as important as it is today. Like in today's time, especially with the level that eyeshadow palettes are at, those swatches mean a lot, and every brand that's gonna come out with a palette shows the swatches. They show them live swatching to just show how pigmented their shadows are. Whereas I feel like years ago, they just kind of focused on the quality of how they looked on the eyes and not so much how they swatched. So I just feel like there's been a big shift with eyeshadow palettes in the recent years, probably a lot having to do with Instagram and, you know, pictures of arm swatches and stuff like that becoming more popular. But because of that, I feel like these brands are trying to put so much pigment into their shadows that, you know, there's a cause and effect. Like if you're going to put so much pigment in there, this is going to happen. So in some cases it's just super powdery, in some cases it's way too pigmented to actually deal with, but because they focused and they tried so hard to get them to be the most pigmented looking, the best looking with the swatches, I feel like it's suffering in the actual application and like what the palette is supposed to do, which is go on your eyeballs and make pretty eyeshadow looks. So yeah, that's a little bit rambly, but that's kind of my idea. But yeah, let's just go ahead and get in, and we're just gonna talk about the 5 palettes that I have had experience with that I think the brand focused way too heavily on how they swatch instead of how they apply to the eyes. The first palette I feel like is, to me, it was kind of the kickstart for this whole trend of just swatching beautifully but not applying beautifully, is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Subculture. Now this is a palette that I actually do really like, and I love the looks that I get from it, but my favorite to reach for in this palette are the yellows and then the greens, like the really hunter greens. The browns are pretty too. There's other palettes that I could reach for though, and my least favorite to use are the blues. Blues just aren't my favorite color, so while this used to be my favorite palette when I kind of wanted to do a me look, after I got the Gemini palette, honestly, that one has my heart, and this one's a lot lower on my favorites list, just because the looks that I would love to get out of this, and the reason I reach for this, I can now get a lot more easily in my Melt Gemini palette. But that, I'm sidetracking totally. Let's just talk about this palette. I feel like when it came out, and especially when it was teased, they really hyped up those swatches. Like when you were seeing the swatches, at least for me, I could not believe how pigmented they looked. And when I got this palette, I still could not believe how pigmented, like just barely touching my finger in there. The pigment is insane, really. Like you gotta hand it, even if you hate using this on your eyes, you gotta hand it that, oh my goodness, there is so much pigment in just the tiniest little swirl of your finger in this palette. That's gorgeous. And I wish it was just as easy to get it to my eyes, but because I feel like they put so much pigment into this powder, it's just really difficult to use on your eyes. You can, but I find that you have to be very gentle going in, you have to be very gentle going on your eyes, and you really don't blend that much, which is really odd in this day and age of like the blending brush. I feel like everybody has a big fluffy blending brush, and so when they do a look, they want to use a big fluffy blending brush. But for me, I get a lot more success, and I enjoy this palette more when I use a more dense brush that has a bit of a flared tip, so then I can just lightly blend around it and call it a day. Another palette that I thought swatched amazingly but wasn't the easiest to use on my eyes was the Boxycharm and PUR Collab palette. I don't think this palette actually has a name. It's just the Boxycharm PUR palette. And this palette, when I swatched it, I remember swatching it and thinking it looked so beautiful. The mattes felt so nice, like they feel really creamy. And then the shimmers also feel really nice as well. Let me grab this blue. The blue is a different color that I noticed even when I went to Swatch. It's one of those kinds that's like, oh, that's a matte, but it has a ton of like shimmer in it. But as you're gonna see, it swatches really nicely. I feel like this is the worst. It's not too bad. Pick the bony part of my arm to swatch. But there's what they look like. I know it looks a bit washed out, but these two colors, keep in mind, are very pastelish colors. They look pigmented, and when you swatch it, they feel nice. They look like they show up well on the skin, and that blue looks gorgeous. But when I actually use this on my eyes, it was not a fun experience at all. I remember the first look I created, I think I did an Instagram tutorial with it. I can leave that link down below. But I was trying to do this really fun and creative look. I think I used the blue, or maybe I used the blue on the lower lash line. I was just trying to do something a lot of fun, but I found that the shimmers did not, like, I was trying to do just a really good cut crease, and I ended up having to go on, I think with like one of these shimmers in the middle, because the mattes and the shimmer that, or whatever I was putting on my lid, it didn't want to blend in. It looks so bad. And so I tried to take a brush and go to one of these shimmers and just kind of meet it in the middle, kind of make a little ombre, mesh it together, that kind of thing. But it didn't want to go from my brush to, like, on my brush to my eye. It wouldn't transfer. It was just really tricky to work with. I didn't enjoy it. And I do know this blue, the times that I used it just on my lower lash line for a pop of color, the little sparkly things in there kept getting in my eye. Really not a fun experience. Don't recommend doing it. So there was just too much about this palette that made it very difficult to work with. But I mean, the swatches are pretty. The next palette that I want to talk about was, you probably guessed this one, the Bad Habit palettes. These palettes, these are the only two that I've actually kind of held onto and kept. But these two, they're okay. Now, Bad Habit, I feel like I'm pretty hard on them, because whenever I talk about them, I talk about not liking them. But if I'm being totally fair, and you kind of forget about all the better palettes that I have in my collection, these are okay. But I think the reason I kind of get so like, no, those aren't any good, is because they're hyped up so much that maybe I just had too good a view of them when I actually got it. And then I got it and used it. I'm just like, huh? It's just not that good. The mattes in here, some of them are good, but most of them are very powdery, and if you try to use too many of them, you just kind of get a muddy mess. Like, there's no defined color. Like, if you try to use this really bright color here and then smoke it out with this brown here, by the time you're done blending this shade in, it's covered this, or just made it, because of the blending action, made this totally disappear and just poof off your lids, and you don't really have that really vibrant color anymore. This yellow was the most disappointing thing. I wanted to do a look one day, and I think I did like a brown look, and I wanted this all over my lid. I wanted that neon yellow just to pop. And so I packed it all over my lid. It looked decent. It didn't look that good, but it looked okay. It wasn't super pigmented when I left my makeup table, but an hour later when I went back and looked in the mirror, all the neon was gone and it looked just like a kind of a yellowy pastel shade on my eyes. I was so disappointed, so let down by that shadow. And then add to that, these shimmers, they're just not the easiest to work with, and I feel like if you have any kind of texture on your eyes, you really aren't gonna like these type of shimmers. They are not flattering to any kind of wrinkles in your eyes, and I felt like anytime I use, some of these are fine, but there are, at least in each palette that I had, a handful, or at least half I would say, of shimmers that when I tried to use them on my eyes, they accentuate and kind of chunk up and build up on my eyes and accentuate every single crevice and crease in my eyes and make it look like the Sahara Desert. It's just so dry looking, so cracky, not attractive, and not what I want when I want a metallic looking eyeshadow look. I don't want to look like I got all these cracks and crevices on my eyes. So these shimmers just aren't my favorite. Like I said, there are some, oh, I said I was gonna swatch these. Let's see, we'll do this one because I love the colors in here. But yeah, the quality, I mean, they swatch, they look so pigmented when you actually just swatch them on your finger. This palette, especially the Aura palette, swatched so nicely, looks so pigmented. Now these Bad Habit palettes are extremely powdery. Now powdery doesn't have to be a bad thing. I'm almost out of frame. Powder doesn't have to be a bad thing. So when I first got these, you can go watch my Shop Hush haul. That's all I did was swatch them. I didn't use them on my eyes that day, and I was excited. I swatched them. I was like, oh my goodness, these a little powdery, but they seem super pigmented. I can't wait to get these on my eyes. I've already given you the whole spiel. I'm not gonna sit here and rehash it. The masks just aren't my favorite because I feel like they very easily dust away. Let's do I don't have a, here, I'll use my skirt. I don't really have a towel, but when you, let's see if I can just get this matte. When you kind of blend it, it just disappears really easily. Like that shadow, the yellow is gone. And so it's just, yeah, definitely had to mention the Bad Habit palettes as brands that focus way too heavily on how they swatch on the arm and not how they actually look and perform on the eyes. Next palette I'm actually gonna scoot over because I don't have it anymore. I did return it, but I purchased the Maybelline Lemonade Craze palette, and I had such high hopes for this because the colors looked a lot of fun. Yes, it was pretty neutral and there was only like 2 or 3 pops of colors, but I still thought I could get a lot of pretty looks out of it, and so I did purchase it and pick it up. I swatched it, and I think I shared the swatch picture that I did on Instagram, and if I did, I will put a picture up here so you guys can see what it looks like. But I was extremely excited when I saw how they swatched on my arm. They, even not just swatching them and how they looked on my arms, but they felt extremely buttery. Like I have never felt a Maybelline eyeshadow feel that buttery soft. They were so smooth, so pigmented, but didn't feel too powdery. So after I swatched them, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna love this. This is gonna be so pretty. I can't wait to start using it. And then I started using it. Now, it wasn't totally insanely bad. You could get looks out of it, but I noticed, and I just felt like the only type of looks you could get was like a pastel lemonade craze. Like it was all very soft in color. Like there wasn't anything too intense. And I'm pretty sure about 2 of the shades in that palette, like the shimmers, were just kind of sheer glitter eyeshadow, and that's not my preference. And yeah, the mattes were just very soft. You could never really get them super intense. If I can find it, and I will find it, but look down below. I'll link it here if I can. But I mentioned it in a monthly makeup review series, and I do include pictures of the eye looks I got, so maybe if you like that kind of very soft eyeshadows, you will appreciate it. But just know that I had to use a concealer underneath all those looks to really give it the pigmentation that you see. And even then when I did it, was doing my eye look, I had to do a lot of building up, I had to do a lot of packing on, very gentle blending, stuff like that to get the most pigment that I could out of it. And those pictures that you'll see in that video, that's the most pigment that I could get. So yeah, that palette, I thought when I first swatched it that Maybelline was gonna hit it out of the park with that palette, but then it just didn't live up to the expectations that I had for it after I swatched it and after I felt how creamy it, feeling it was on my arm, how beautifully it swatched on my arm. It just did not live up to expectations. And finally, this last palette, I kind of struggled if I should include it, but I'm going to include it because when I swatched it, I was excited and then really disappointed when I actually used on my eyes. So I'm talking about the Morphe and Jaclyn Hill Armed and Gorgeous palette. This is the only palette that I got out of her collection, so I can't speak to any of the other eyeshadow palettes in the collection if, you know, they're the same story or not, but considering all the drama, probably are. I did pick this up from Ulta because there was no way that I was going to purchase from the Morphe website. Yeah, I like to purchase from places that I know have a really good and a really honest return policy. So I knew when this was coming out, like this was really attracted, like I was really attracted to this palette, but I was like, I'm not gonna buy it if I have to buy it off of Morphe's website. And then I heard that Ulta was gonna be getting it. So honestly, that's the reason I purchased this palette. But anyway, this palette swatches really nicely. I know a lot of people are saying the green swatches like crap, but and take this from someone who hasn't had a ton of experience with green eyeshadows, but I've swatched this and I've done the Subculture and then the Melt Cosmetics, which has this type of really hunter, really khaki type of green. And in my experience, this is a pretty darn good swatch for this type of color. Usually this color of green, this tone of green does not swatch pretty. And honestly, in the Melt Cosmetics Gemini palette, I would tell you that the Gemini palette swatches worse than this one. Like this swatch is better than that one. So when I got this palette and I swatched it, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is really nice. And then this orange and this yellow, once again, I'm all over the place, sorry. Swatched them and I thought that I redid the green one. Ugh, Katie is not coordinated. This finger. They swatched okay. Nothing crazy. Gotta keep track of what's on what finger. Nothing crazy pigmented like Subculture or anything like that. But I thought like, oh, like that looks promising. It's not the most pigmented when it comes to the mattes, but let's see how it does on the eyes. But what really disappointed me and got my hopes up was the shimmers in this palette. And that's kind of mainly what I'm talking about when the company focused too heavily on how the shimmers in this palette swatch. Because I know the mattes in here I feel like are average. But what really blew me away is when I swatched the shimmers in this palette. Oh my goodness. They look so pretty. And then let me see if I can be a little more coordinated on these series of swatches. But so pretty. I feel like you guys are just washed out. I think you guys can see that, but they swatch beautifully. They feel extremely creamy and they look extremely pigmented on the arms. So I was like, this looks beautiful. If I can get these mattes to build up, the shimmer is gonna be outstanding. But what I found is actually it reminds me a lot of Bad Habits shimmers in that they are so creamy. And when you're using them with a brush, sometimes the brush doesn't want to actually transfer them. They definitely work best if you just use your finger to go on. But even then, like if you go too heavy in one spot and if you have a really tacky base, which I typically do with either concealer if I'm cutting the crease out, or because these have this shade especially, and this shade has really like intense glitter, I don't want that falling on my face throughout the day. So I put a glitter glue down before I put them on to help with that. So glitter glue is a very sticky base, and I took that and I kind of packed on my lid and I tried to tap it on and then swipe. It just kind of clumped all in one spot. It was very difficult to move around, and then I felt like in the spot that I initially put it down still was pretty intense and thick, and it gave me that whole look of like when I opened my eyes, it was a little creaky, crackly, not really attractive. At least in my opinion, that's not the look I want when I want a really metallic look to my eyeshadow. So yeah, the shimmers or metallics, whatever they call them in this palette, looked so promising on the arm, and I feel like Morphe, when they were promoting this before it launched, they were showing really good swatching. Jaclyn's videos looked amazing in the swatching, and then after it's released, it's a lot more difficult to put on the eyes than you would think from the swatches. And I know Morphe and Jaclyn Hill really blame it on like inconsistencies in the different labs they went to, but I feel like that's not a really good excuse. And I feel like nowadays, anytime there are some like bad palettes and bad reviews, people always blame it on these inconsistencies. And I'm just like, what lab is this? Because whatever lab you guys are using to get these inconsistent ones, you need to just stop working with them. But anyway, I just feel like that's kind of like, you know, on social media when something blows up and the brand just comes back and be like, oh, that was an intern. And it's like, I feel like it's that way with when a new palette releases and there are, you know, people are giving bad reviews. It's like, oh, that was a bad, you know, bad lab. Don't know why those are bad, but all the other ones are great. But anyway, yeah, I don't know where I got off on that tangent, but I just felt like I should share that. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this video. Those are the 5 palettes that I wanted to mention. Let me know in the comments if there are any palettes that you personally got and you swatched them on your arm and had such high expectations, and then when you went to actually use them on your eyes, either they were too pigmented to actually work with, or they were not pigmented enough, or too powdery and just kind of poof, all the pigmentation was gone. Let me know down below. I'd love to hear if there are any palettes that I overlooked, didn't think about, or just haven't had experience with that you have. Definitely let me know. I love chatting with you guys in the comments. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this video. Like I said in the beginning, I'm not sure how informative this video is because it's not really like solving anything, but I just wanted to share this with you. And if nothing else, I hope it was entertaining. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye guys.